Hi, I'm Arlena. This isn't just a story about an iPhone. It's about the moment I realized my family didn't see me as one of them. My sister opened the gift I saved for weeks to buy and smirked. Mom said if you vanished, we'd all feel relieved. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was how long they'd been erasing me. From birthday photos, from house deeds, from my own identity, without ever saying a word. Why would a family do that to one of their own? And how far did they go to make sure I disappeared? You think that was the cruelest thing they did? I showed up 10 minutes early, the iPhone box tucked carefully into the gift bag on my passenger seat. I'd saved for weeks, eating peanut butter sandwiches, skipping Friday wine nights, just to afford that phone. Mallory had just turned 16, and I knew she wanted the newest model. It was more than a gift. It was me trying, again, to belong. Dolores's house was full, the way it always was for Mallory. Everyone came when she called. Cousins, neighbors, folks I hadn't seen in years suddenly found their way to our front porch. The smell of cinnamon rolls mixed with fried sausage filled the air, and for a second, I let myself pretend this was just a Southern family brunch, not another stage for me to stand on with a target on my back. I stepped inside, greeting folks with half smiles and a practiced tone. I found Mallory near the fireplace, surrounded by a sea of pink balloons and Snapchatting the moment. I handed her the bag. She pulled out the box with a gasp. "Oh my God!" she said, flashing the back of the phone to her friends like it was gold. "This is sick." Then she looked up, her grin morphing into something meaner. "Mom says if you vanished, we'd all feel relieved," she said and giggled. A sharp, airy sound, the kind a person makes when they know no one will call them out. Laughter spread like fire. One cousin actually clapped. Dolores didn't even flinch, just kept stirring something in the kitchen like she was deaf. And my sister, Mallory's mother, smirked as if to say, "You brought this on yourself." I stood there, clutching my purse strap. Every laugh felt like it was aimed at my ribs. I didn't speak. I didn't move. Just stood, burning from the inside out, letting it wash over me. Eventually, someone said, "Let's get a picture." And they all huddled together like nothing had happened. I wasn't invited into the frame. Again. I walked to the kitchen, partly to breathe, partly to make sure my hands weren't shaking too obviously. Dolores was still there, pouring sweet tea into a pitcher, with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "You're not eating?" she asked without looking up. "No. Just needed some air." She wiped her hands on a towel and leaned on the counter, her voice calm and almost casual. "Truth be told, I should have left you at the hospital that night. Mallory was the only one I needed." The glass pitcher didn't shatter, but my silence did. I didn't argue. I didn't scream. I just nodded, because I'd heard worse. Not in words, maybe, but in the way she forgot to tell me about family dinners, in the way my name was always missing from Christmas cards, in the way she called me the helper when friends asked about her kids. "You always take things so personally," she added with a shrug, walking away. The drive back to my apartment felt longer than usual. My fingers clenched the steering wheel so hard my knuckles ached. The silence in my car was louder than the laughter had been. That night, I sat alone on my couch, still in the dress I'd worn to the brunch. My phone buzzed. A photo from the party. Mallory smiling, Dolores hugging her, everyone crowded around the cake I had ordered and paid for. I stared at the screen for a long time. Then, slowly, deliberately, I tapped into the family group chat and hit Leave Conversation. I opened my photo gallery, selected every family picture, every screenshot of text chains where I picked up the slack, paid bills, covered birthday costs, and deleted them. No ceremony, no tears, just erasure. Like they had done to me over and over. I pulled out the receipt from my purse, the one for the iPhone, folded it once, then again, and tucked it into the back of a drawer. Not because I wanted it, because I needed to remember just how much I'd given to people who would never admit I mattered. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. But something inside me shifted. I didn't sleep much after that night. My eyes stayed open long after the city dimmed, long after even the neighborhood dogs fell quiet. And still, I kept seeing that photo on my phone. Mallory's smile, Dolores's arm draped around her like a crown. The cake, the people, the sheer absence of me. 2 weeks later, I got a text from Mallory. BBQ this Sunday. Just fam. Come if you want. No emoji. No, thanks for the phone. I stared at it for a moment, then shoved my phone in a drawer. But Sunday came, and I went. Not because I wanted to, because I needed to see it one last time. That place. That house. Them. By the time I arrived, the backyard was already packed. Paper plates, squealing kids, someone playing a Bluetooth speaker too loud near the fence. Dolores waved vaguely from the grill, more out of habit than welcome. My sister, Mallory's mom, barely looked up from whatever story she was telling about how exhausting family can be. I kept to the edge, mostly by the lemonade cooler. An hour in, Mallory clapped her hands and shouted, "Okay, y'all, surprise time!" She pointed to the flat-screen TV someone had wheeled outside onto the patio. 20 years of Vexley family memories. I made this myself. Let's go. People whistled, hollered, pulled lawn chairs closer. I stayed standing, my back against the porch rail. The slideshow started with faded photos from the 90s. Dolores with rollers in her hair. My sister as a baby in a high chair. Mallory's first steps. Birthdays, vacations. A trip to Disney. Photo after photo. Minute after minute. But not once, not a single image, had me in it. Not even the picture from my college graduation. The one I'd mailed to them twice. Not the trip to Myrtle Beach I paid for. Not the Thanksgiving I hosted. Even the damn Christmas where I bought everyone matching sweaters. Gone. It was 20 minutes of revisionist history. 20 minutes of proof that I'd already been cut out. When the video ended, people clapped. Dolores turned to the group and said, "We tried to keep it short and sweet." I opened my mouth, then closed it. What was I going to say? You forgot me? No, they hadn't. They had deleted me on purpose. On the way home, I drove without turning the radio on. The houses blurred past, one after another, while something inside me clicked shut. Not with a bang, but a firm, final thud. No one noticed I hadn't been in the slideshow. Or if they had, they'd agreed with it. Back in my apartment, I dropped my keys in the bowl by the door and sat down at my desk. I didn't bother turning on the lamp, just let the streetlight outside fill the room with a soft gray haze. My hands moved without thinking, opening the bottom drawer. Inside, an old USB drive sat tucked between rubber bands and expired coupons. I slid it into my laptop. Folder after folder opened, photos I had saved, sorted, labeled. Birthdays, holidays, even old scanned Polaroids I'd taken from dusty albums to preserve. All mine. All family. I scrolled through them slowly, one by one. I had sent half of them to Mallory over the years, helped her build her class projects, her middle school scrapbook, her first iMovie. They used my photos, my records, and still erased me. I shut the laptop and stared into the dark. A part of me hoped I was being sensitive. Maybe it was just a mistake, but it wasn't. I walked to the bathroom and clicked on the light. The mirror caught me, hair messy, eyes tired, lips pulled tight. I didn't look angry. I looked resigned. You were always the extra, I whispered to the glass. The filler, the help. Not bitter, not even surprised. Just stating facts. I didn't call anyone that night, didn't post a thing. But inside, a switch flipped. A final one. The one that stops you from offering any more of yourself, not because you're broken, but because you've finally woken up. I shut the bathroom light and went to bed. Alone. But not confused anymore. Morning came with the alarm screaming at 6:30 like nothing had changed. The sun spilled through my blinds too bright for someone who barely slept, and my apartment, though quiet, felt heavier than usual. I pulled on slacks, a blouse, tied my hair back, and drove into the office. Just like always. Except nothing felt like always anymore. By mid-morning, I was halfway through replying to emails when my phone buzzed. It was a notification from my bank. Potential fraud detected. Please review recent activity. I clicked through out of habit. And then I froze. There was a credit card account linked to my name, one I hadn't used or remembered opening. It was maxed out. Utility bills, streaming services, even a couple of Walmart charges stacked across months. Over $4,300 due. Past due. I double-checked the address the bank had on file for the card. It wasn't mine. It was my mother's house. I sat there, in my work cubicle, surrounded by glass walls and fluorescent light, feeling like the floor had cracked open beneath my chair. After lunch, I called the provider. They asked for my social security number. I gave it. They confirmed it matched the one on file. I asked who opened the account. "Ma'am, the account was opened 5 years ago. Authorization shows a match to the primary holder. You." "No, I didn't open that," I said, my voice flat. "And I've never lived at that address in my adult life." A pause. Then, "I understand. Do you suspect identity theft?" "No." I suspected something worse. By the time I clocked out that evening, I couldn't even remember what I had worked on all day. I drove straight to a mortgage advisor, someone I'd used 2 years earlier when I was thinking of refinancing my condo. He greeted me like an old friend and ushered me into his office. I told him I needed a full credit pull, fast. Explained there'd been unusual activity. As he tapped and clicked through reports, he tilted his head. "Looks like you were co-signed on a property about 6 years ago. You're not on the title anymore. But at one point, yeah, right here you were listed. What property?" He gave me the address. It was Dolores's house. I stared at the screen. My name, formerly attached, now gone. "Can I see the removal paperwork?" He nodded, printed a page, and slid it across the desk. There it was, a notarized form showing I had signed over my rights. Except I hadn't. The signature on that paper looked like mine. The loop in the A, the sharp curve of the V. But it wasn't from my hand. My stomach clenched. I remembered a week in spring, just after my birthday, when Dolores handed me a stack of envelopes and cards to sign on behalf of the family. One had been for the city clerk's office. I didn't ask questions. Now I knew I should have. I thanked him, said I'd be in touch, and walked out with my head spinning. The sky was already dusky, the parking lot half empty. I sat in my car, keys in my hand, wondering when exactly they stopped seeing me as a daughter and started treating me like a utility. Back home, I went straight to my desk. The bottom drawer used to hold all the important documents from my family: bills, insurance forms, tax returns. I'd stopped offering help a few months ago, had boxed up the last pile and dropped it off at Dolores's with a polite, "I'm not doing this anymore." Apparently, that hadn't stopped them. The drawer was empty. Not because I cleared it, but because I'd already handed over every single part of myself they could use, and they still found ways to pull more. I opened my laptop again, this time with a different purpose, logged into the Federal Trade Commission's identity theft portal, filed the paperwork, uploaded evidence. Quietly. No dramatic declarations. No angry calls. I'd finally learned that telling them what I was doing only gave them time to do worse. When I was done, I closed the laptop, poured myself a glass of water, and sat in the silence of my one-bedroom apartment. The only space in the world, it seemed, where nothing had been altered, stolen, or revised. Not yet. They could twist the past, sign my name, drain my credit, pretend I didn't exist. But I was still here, and I had just started writing them out of my future. Sunday came dressed in silence. I hadn't stepped outside yet, but the phone rang twice before I even had a chance to make coffee. Mallory's name lit up the screen. I almost didn't pick up, but something about her calling so early felt calculated. "Hey, sunshine," she chirped. The fake warmth in her voice felt like it had been practiced in a mirror. "Mom wanted me to call and see if you could help with the deposit for her milestone birthday brunch. We're thinking Southern Seasons, maybe the rooftop. She deserves something elegant." I didn't respond immediately. There was always a we that never included me, except when there was a bill to be paid. "Wait," I said slowly. "You already booked the venue, didn't you?" A beat, then a chuckle. "Well, yeah, but only because they were filling up fast. I figured you'd want to contribute." In the background, I heard Dolores's voice, slightly muffled but clear. "You know she always comes through. She's reliable." They had it rehearsed. It wasn't a request. It was routine. "I won't be covering that," I said plainly. There was a long pause on the other end. "No?" Mallory asked, like the word itself was foreign. "No," I repeated. "You've got the wrong girl this year." I ended the call, not with anger, not with bitterness, just done. I left my coffee untouched. That night, sometime around 9:30, my phone rang again. This time, it wasn't family. It was from work. Specifically, a security engineer from a tech client I managed freelance contracts for. His tone wasn't angry, just cautious. "Hey, Arlena. I wanted to flag something that popped up in our firewall. There was a remote login using your credentials. But the IP address was odd. Georgia-based, residential. You happen to be out of town?" "No, I'm home," he exhaled. "Then we've got a problem." He sent the log. The IP? It matched the one tied to my mom's house. I sat back, mind racing. I hadn't logged into their system from there in years. But I had once used my personal laptop while visiting, and I'd shared it with Mallory a few times, back when I believed sisters shared more than blood. A deeper check confirmed the worst. An internal draft, one I'd written, structured, and pitched, had been forwarded, not to our team, but to a known competitor. We lost the account. I didn't call Mallory. What could she possibly say that wouldn't make it worse? Instead, I archived the email chain, backed up the security logs, wrote a statement for the legal team, and hit send. I closed my laptop gently this time. The anger was still there, but no longer wild. It was precise, like a scalpel. 2 days passed. I worked late, kept my head down, waited for the week to end. When I got home Thursday evening, something felt off. The hallway light was on. And my door? It wasn't locked. At first, I thought maybe I'd forgotten, but then I stepped inside and heard voices. Dolores sat at my kitchen island, chatting with a real estate agent I didn't recognize. She looked up, completely unbothered. "Oh, good," she said. "You're home early. We were just finishing up." The agent smiled politely. "We were discussing the potential market value. Your kitchen layout is ideal for first-time buyers." I didn't move. Dolores stood, walked over, and placed a hand on my shoulder, like she still had rights to me. "I figured you wouldn't mind. I wanted a professional opinion, just in case I decide to downsize." "In my apartment?" "Well," she said, tilting her head, "we always sort of shared everything." I walked past her without another word, picked up my phone from the dining table, and called the locksmith. "Can someone come today?" The agent shifted uncomfortably. Dolores looked amused. "Yes," I said into the phone. "Right now. Emergency Reiki." I hung up. Still didn't raise my voice. Still didn't accuse. Dolores opened her mouth. I held up a hand. "You don't live here. You never did. This is my home." She tried to smile. "You know, for a girl who says she wants peace, you sure act like a stranger." I met her eyes. "Maybe that's because you made me one." She didn't reply. I opened the door and waited. The agent stepped out first. Dolores followed, slower, like she expected me to change my mind. I didn't. The locksmith arrived 30 minutes later. As the lock clicked into place, I felt a strange kind of quiet settle over me. Not peace, exactly, but ownership. They had erased me from memories, photos, titles, money. But I still had this one key, this one lock, this one space that, for now, belonged only to me. And that was enough. 2 nights after changing the locks, I received an embossed invitation slid under my door. Not mailed, hand-delivered. It was from the Carter Women's Fund, an upscale charity I'd quietly supported over the years. The gala was set to honor key contributors at the Civic Center downtown. I hadn't planned to go, but the seal caught my attention, along with the event's theme, Women Who Build. I donated anonymously through a joint family foundation set up years ago when things were different. Back when I thought joint actually meant shared. Out of curiosity, and maybe something closer to suspicion, I RSVP'd, borrowed a black sheath dress from a friend, and arrived just before 7 p.m. The ballroom was gilded and humming. Crystal chandeliers, white-gloved servers, cocktail chatter spilling across silk-covered tables. I slipped in quietly, scanned the room from the corner near the back. Mallory stood near the stage, radiant in a floor-length gown, drink in hand, schmoozing with one of the foundation directors. She didn't see me. Or maybe she did and didn't care. When the MC took the microphone, I expected the usual donor acknowledgments. But then she said Mallory's name. And now, let's recognize our main sponsor tonight, whose generosity helped us secure this stunning venue. The crowd clapped. Mallory climbed the stage like she belonged there. Not a flinch of hesitation, not one glance back. Then she began to speak, and I froze. The words she read, almost verbatim, were mine. The speech I'd drafted in my notes app, stored on my cloud, never shared with anyone directly. Lines I'd agonized over during a late night, wrestling with how to describe the silent strength of women who repair what they didn't break. She had taken it. My speech. My donation. My place. I didn't walk out. I stayed motionless. I wanted to remember what betrayal sounded like when it came dressed in satin and applause. When the program ended, I left without speaking to anyone. The valet brought my car around. As I slid into the driver's seat, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. But my jaw ached from how tightly I'd been clenching it. 2 days later, at the office, my co-worker Jenna approached me quietly by the coffee machine. "Hey, just checking. Are you doing okay?" she asked, eyes flicking left and right. "I'm fine," I said, uncertain what she was referring to. Jenna hesitated. "It's just, my aunt knows your mom from church. She said something about you maybe having a rough patch again." I blinked. "A rough patch?" Jenna looked mortified. "Forget I said anything." But I didn't forget. Later that night, I checked my message requests. Buried between spam and sales pitches was a note from my cousin Dean. "Hey, just wondering if you're okay. Aunt Dolores mentioned you've been acting paranoid again. If you ever need someone to talk to, I'm here." There it was. They weren't just stealing from me anymore. They were rewriting who I was. Gaslighting by gossip. Reframing my silence as instability, my distance as dysfunction. I didn't respond. Instead, I took screenshots, logged dates, forwarded the message chain to myself with notes. I didn't care if Dean meant well. The damage wasn't in intention. It was in what was spreading. That night, I sat at my dining table with my laptop and a folder full of paper receipts, donation records, time-stamped emails, and photographs of my handwritten speech. I drafted a letter, not emotional, not personal, just facts, backed by documentation. It read like a cease and desist, because that's exactly what it was. By midnight, I had 3 sealed envelopes stamped and ready, one addressed to Dolores, one to Mallory, and one to the board of the Carter Foundation. I walked them to the corner mailbox in my hoodie and slippers. No makeup, no fanfare, just a woman with a line, and the pen to draw it. It wasn't vengeance, not yet, but it was the first act of war. And war doesn't always start with a shout. Sometimes it starts with a printed page that simply says, "No more." The morning after mailing those letters, I gave myself the rare luxury of sleeping in. No meetings, no errands, just a quiet Saturday with the kind of silence I'd earned. Around noon, I poured myself a second cup of coffee and settled in by the window with my laptop, catching up on work notes. The sun was warm, spilling across the hardwood, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I had to brace myself. That feeling lasted exactly 20 minutes. It started with shouting, muffled at first, then clearer. My name, over and over. I moved to the front of my apartment, slid open the window just enough to see. Dolores stood outside the complex gate in her Sunday coat, like she was heading to church, only she was yelling loud enough to wake the dead. Mallory was next to her, arms folded, voice shrill. And behind them, of all people, was Uncle Wade, who hadn't called me in over 3 years, but now looked ready to pitch a tent in my driveway. They weren't knocking, they were performing. "Arlena!" Mallory shouted. "Don't act like you're too good for family. You think you can cut us out and no one's gonna say anything?" Dolores chimed in, voice dripping venom. "You ungrateful brat. You think you can just rewrite history?" Someone across the courtyard stepped onto their porch, one of my neighbors, Alan. Another leaned out of her window with a phone in hand, recording. Great. I walked out slowly, still in my house slippers. I didn't raise my voice, didn't rush, just stood at the top of the concrete steps and took in the scene like it was a school play I hadn't bought tickets to. "You finished?" I asked, keeping my tone flat. Mallory blinked. "Excuse me? You're accusing me of stealing money. Dolores says I've damaged the family, so I'm giving you an option." They both went quiet. "Call the police," I said. "Right now, or go home." Dolores narrowed her eyes. "Are you threatening us?" I smiled just slightly. "Not at all, just tired of all the noise." Mallory started to speak again, but Wade put a hand on her arm. "Let's go," he muttered. "This looks bad." And it did. They turned finally and walked off in a tight cluster, Dolores muttering something about me needing serious help. I didn't care. What I cared about came the following Monday. In my mailbox was a thick envelope from a collections agency. At first, I thought it was junk mail, but when I opened it, my hands froze. An unpaid medical bill. $7,800. The date of service? 2 years ago. Location? Midtown General. Patient listed, Dolores Vexley. My mother. The billing address? An old unit I'd rented back when my current apartment was under renovation. The same one I'd let her stay in for 3 weeks when her house was being fumigated. But the account was in my name, my insurance, my workplace, my emergency contact. All of it was mine. Except the body that received the treatment. I called the hospital immediately. After 20 minutes of transfers, I got a billing agent who confirmed it. The information was entered during intake, likely by the patient or someone accompanying her. When I asked for the name of the accompanying person, she hesitated but finally said, "It was listed as Mallory Vexley." I thanked her, hung up, and stared at the wall for a long minute. They weren't just invading my space anymore. They were colonizing my identity. I emailed my attorney, attaching the documents. Within hours, he called back and said, "We're adding this to the file. I'll loop in a fraud specialist." I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. My throat was too dry to speak. That night, I began collecting everything. A secured folder on my computer, a labeled hard drive backup, screenshots, voice memos, photos of mail, printouts of my neighbor's text confirming what he witnessed. Then I filed a police report. Not dramatic, just factual. The next day, I visited the building office, handed the manager a copy of the report, and requested a formal access restriction. I showed them the time-stamped hallway footage, the one from last week when Dolores let herself into the lobby, unannounced, with a key she should never have had. The manager was polite, professional, promised to disable any unauthorized access codes immediately. As I walked out of the office, I saw the reflection of myself in the glass door, shoulders back, steps steady. I wasn't hiding anymore. They had played this game in whispers and shadows, behind closed doors and family dinners I was no longer invited to. I wasn't playing. They'd crossed every line they thought I was too afraid to defend. And now I had a line of my own. They could scream at the sky all they wanted. But if they barged in again, I'd be waiting. Papers ready, recordings filed, attorney on speed dial. They kicked down my door once. Next time, they'd meet consequences. Dinner with Ethan was the kind of simple Friday night I used to think only other people had. He made a roast chicken, roasted vegetables, even lit candles. I brought a bottle of wine and tried not to overthink how easy it felt just sitting there, being seen. No questions about money, no passive jabs, just quiet conversation and the soft jazz he always played low in the background. After dessert, his homemade peach cobbler, he hesitated. Not the kind of pause that comes before a compliment, but the kind that makes you brace without knowing why. "There's something I need to tell you," he said, placing his fork down. I nodded, resting my chin on my hand. "Okay. Your sister, Mallory, messaged me." I blinked. "What?" He reached for his phone, unlocked it, and turned the screen toward me. Her name lit up at the top of the messages, like a neon sign in a dive bar I never meant to enter again. "She said you've struggled in the past," he said slowly, trying to cushion it. "That maybe you weren't in the best place, emotionally, that I should be careful." I didn't speak. "She told me," he continued, "that you once hurt yourself, that you've had trouble keeping jobs, that you might be manipulating me." I looked at him then, not for anger, for recognition. "And you believed her?" His face softened. "No, not for a second. I know who you are. I know what you've been carrying." I exhaled, but it wasn't relief. It was grief, the kind that hits when someone tries to gut the one good thing you've managed to build from all the rubble. "She's trying to take everything," I whispered. "She won't," he said, taking my hand across the table. "Not this." That night, I walked home instead of letting him drive me. The air was cool, a little damp. I needed the quiet, the rhythm of my steps on the sidewalk to process the newest knife she'd thrown. And maybe, if I'm honest, I needed space from even the kindness. Because even love now came with surveillance. By Saturday, I had pushed it aside for the charity party my team had planned. It was meant to celebrate the launch of our outreach project, a win I'd worked for months to secure. I hadn't wanted a fuss, but they were excited, proud. I didn't want to be the reason their enthusiasm dimmed. So I went. I smiled. I gave a short thank you speech when asked. Then the cake came out. "Congrats, Arlene!" It read in bold blue frosting. There was a pause, a few awkward chuckles. Someone whispered, "That's not how you spell it, right?" A coworker stepped forward. "Your sister helped order it. She said that's what everyone called you growing up." They all laughed. I didn't. Arlene, she'd done this before. Field trip forms in grade school, spelling bees, even at my college graduation party. "You're so forgettable, even your name slides off people's tongues," she used to say, all sugar and venom. I smiled gently at my coworkers. "It's okay," I said, lifting the knife to cut the cake. "She always gets it wrong. It's kind of her thing." No one spoke after that, but I saw their eyes shift, saw the silent apology in their glances. They weren't laughing anymore. Later that night, I sat in front of the mirror brushing out my hair. My face looked tired. Yes, but not broken. The room behind me was quiet, but the hum in my chest wasn't fear anymore. It was focus. I opened my laptop, navigated to the folder titled Case File Vexley, and began adding the screenshots Ethan had sent me of Mallory's messages. The cake photo, too. The contact form from the bakery. And I updated the timeline, the sequence, the pattern. I didn't need to tell anyone I was building something. I just needed to keep going. She could twist my name. She could try to poison trust. She could make the world laugh at my expense. But she couldn't undo the woman I'd become from surviving her. I wasn't looking for a family anymore. I was building my case. The next morning, I skipped the gym, skipped the emails, skipped everything but the one thing that mattered: getting to Ms. Ritchie's office before the world could start spinning again. The city was still waking up when I arrived, fog hugging the sidewalks, traffic lights blinking with no urgency. But inside me, everything was wide awake. I clutched my coffee like armor as I sat across from the woman who had quietly, methodically, built my escape route one notarized page at a time. Ms. Ritchie didn't start with small talk. She clicked open a folder, turned her screen toward me, and said, "This is what they tried to hide." On it was a scanned document, yellowed at the corners, handwritten in ink that had bled slightly with age. It was the original will. My grandmother's real signature. Dated. Witnessed. Stamped. And in it, clear as day, were my initials next to a list of assets. A portion of the trust, stock shares, and, most jarring, the house in Savannah. The one Dolores claimed was never really mine. She scrolled again. The next document was the one Dolores had submitted after the funeral. Typed, clean, conveniently missing my name. "You always felt erased," Ms. Ritchie said softly, "because you were." I leaned back, letting the weight of it settle in. "Can you prove who altered it?" She nodded. "We had a handwriting analyst examine both. Your sister, Mallory, has a particular way of looping her Ys. She mimicked the signature, but not well enough. I didn't ask what would happen next. I just looked out the window. For the first time in a long time, I felt gravity shift in my favor. Thursday arrived like a held breath, finally exhaled. The courthouse was modest. Wood-paneled walls, a tired flag, a judge with glasses low on his nose, who didn't look impressed by much. Dolores wore a beige suit, pearls, and a look of serene indifference. Mallory sat beside her, legs crossed, smiling at something on her phone like she was at brunch. Me? I came alone. Ms. Ritchie laid out the documents in front of the judge with a calmness that belied the storm we were dragging into sunlight. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. When the forgery report was handed over, I watched Mallory's face the way you watch a glacier crack, slow, inevitable, loud only in what it meant. Her mouth twitched once, then again. She looked at our mother. Dolores's knuckles had gone pale against her handbag. The judge read in silence, then removed his glasses. He looked directly at Mallory. "This borders on criminal," he said. Not dramatic, not loud, just final. Mallory opened her mouth, closed it. Dolores looked down. I said nothing, because silence was louder than anything I could say, and I wanted them to sit in it. Outside, the sun was brighter than it had any right to be for early March. I sat on the courthouse steps and let it warm my face for a moment, not smiling, just breathing, steady, whole. That evening, I walked into my apartment and spotted the old box of family photos in the corner. I hadn't touched it in months. I opened it. The scent of old paper and dust rose like memory itself. I flipped through pictures from birthdays, vacations, cookouts, everyone slightly tilted to crop me out, fade me down, or forget me altogether. One photo stopped me. I was maybe 8, holding a paintbrush and overalls, covered in color, grinning at something just out of frame. My arm was cut off at the elbow, where someone had trimmed the edge. I set it aside. Not because it hurt, because I didn't need it anymore. I grabbed my phone and texted Ethan, "Free Thursday if you are. Dinner's on me." Then I opened my laptop, logged into the old family cloud folder where everyone used to dump pictures, files, calendar events, things they assumed I'd always maintain. I clicked Leave Shared Folder, then Delete from Account. No ceremony, no announcement, just a clean break, not for vengeance, for air. Because they'd tried to write me out of everything that mattered. But I had survived them, and they could never rewrite that. I didn't mark the day on my calendar. There was no red circle, no countdown. But the envelope came anyway, pressed linen, black border, my name typed neatly across the front like a courtesy they didn't mean. A memorial service for my father. Simple, formal, arranged by Mallory and Dolores. It arrived on a Monday. I left it unopened until Wednesday. Then, I tossed it in the recycling bin without a word. I didn't call. I didn't text. I didn't go. The service took place that Saturday, in the community church, where we used to sit in the second pew growing up. A neighbor down the hall, Mrs. Adler, who seemed to be friends with everyone in town, mentioned it as we passed in the elevator. "Lovely turnout," she said, then paused. "They didn't mention your name, Not once. I nodded. That sounds about right. She hesitated, like she wanted to say more, then thought better of it. I appreciated that. People mean well, but some things are better left in silence, especially when silence is finally a choice, not a punishment. Sunday morning, I drove past the house, not because I missed it, just to see it once more, as it stood, a shell of the place I remembered. There was a new for sale sign staked in the front yard, shiny and white, with fully remodeled family home printed in cursive font across the flyer. Curious, I pulled over, rolled down the window, and tapped the QR code with my phone. The listing popped up. Bright photos of the renovated kitchen, new backsplash I'd picked out 2 years ago, floors I paid for when Dolores said she couldn't afford contractors, the layout I redesigned when Mallory insisted she had no eye for that stuff. Under the photo carousel, a caption read, "Updated with love and family effort." I nearly laughed. There was a part of me that wanted to email the realtor and correct the record, but the urge passed as quickly as it came. I took one screenshot, titled it "Closure," and saved it in my private folder, next to photos of court filings and deleted family threads. That was all the justice I needed now. By late afternoon, I was back in my apartment. I had repainted the living room 2 weeks prior, soft sage green, warm and alive in the natural light. The space felt new, even though nothing truly monumental had changed except me. On the coffee table sat a frame I hadn't touched since college. Inside it now, my latest watercolor, a bright burst of oranges and indigos layered over soft gray mountains. I'd started painting again, quietly, cautiously, without an audience. It was something I used to love before it was laughed off, dismissed as a hobby I was too old for. Now it sat on my wall, not asking for approval, not needing permission to exist. There was a knock at the door just past 6. Ethan. He held 2 takeaway coffees and didn't say much. We moved to the balcony, where the air carried the scent of jasmine from a neighbor's window box, and the hum of weekend traffic below blended into the kind of white noise that calms you instead of crowding you. We didn't talk about court, or family, or Mallory. Instead, we talked about the pop-up art exhibit on Main Street, about how I might finally take that weekend trip to Asheville, about nothing that needed defending. At one point, he asked, "You okay?" I took a sip of the warm coffee and nodded. "Yeah. Actually, I think I am." We sat quietly after that. For the first time in years, I wasn't rehearsing what to say if someone asked why I didn't show up. Why I didn't fight harder to be included. Why I didn't care enough to chase what never belonged to me in the first place. They didn't say my name at the memorial, but I remembered it. I signed it in court filings, in rental agreements, on canvases taped to my studio wall. They ignored the woman I became, but she didn't, and that was enough. I watched the last edge of the sun slip behind the skyline. This time, there was no applause, no spotlight, just peace, and that was finally enough. You know, for the longest time, I thought being quiet made me the better person. That if I just kept giving, kept forgiving, kept proving, maybe they'd finally see me. But here's what I learned the hard way. Some people don't want to see you. They want to use you. And the longer you stay quiet, the more invisible you become, even to yourself. Standing up for yourself doesn't always look like slamming doors or shouting matches. Sometimes it's filing the report, locking the door, deleting the folder, saying, "No more." And if you're listening to this right now, maybe it's not about family for you. Maybe it's a friend, a spouse, a job, a place you keep returning to that keeps shrinking you. Whatever it is. I hope you hear me when I say this. You don't need their permission to protect your peace. So now I'd love to hear from you. Has anyone ever tried to erase your worth? And how did you reclaim it? Drop a 1 in the comments if this story touched something deep in you. Or tell me where you're watching from. I'd love to know. And if this story didn't quite hit home, that's okay too. Let me know why and where you're tuning in from. Your perspective matters. If you want more real, raw stories like this, stories about healing, strength, and hard-earned peace, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. This community is growing, and I'd love for you to be part of it. Until next time, take care of your space, your voice, and your story.